Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this webinar with complying with FDA design control requirements using requirements management principle. My name is Marie, and I will be the host for today's webinar. Before we dive into the content, I have a few housekeeping items to share with you. So first, at the bottom of your screen are multiple application engagement tools that you can use. So all those engagement tools are resizable and movable, so feel free to move them around to get the most out of your desktop space. You can also expand your presentation area or maximize it to full screen by clicking on the arrows in the top right corner. If you happen to have any issues with your audio or your video, you can find some answers in the help widget located at the bottom of your screen. Please note that we have a resource list available for you. You will find a copy of today's slide deck and additional resources. So have a look and download everything that you may find useful. On top of this, the webinar will be recorded and sent that email that you registered with in the coming days. And lastly, if you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to submit them through the Q&A widget. We will have some time at the end of the presentation to answer a few questions coming from the audience, but we are also here to answer you live via the chat, so don't hesitate to reach out. And in case we run out of time or we didn't manage to answer you, we'll make sure to follow up later by email. So after those housekeeping rules, let me introduce you to our speaker. So today the webinar will be hosted by Mercedes Marzana, who is owner of MDM Engineering Consulting. She is a medical device subject matter expert, offering more than 35 years of management and technical expertise in the industry. So after this quick intro, Mercedes, I'm going to let you go through the agenda and start your presentation.
Thank you, Marie. So our agenda for today is we're going to talk a little bit about the design controls and what they are. We're going to talk about requirements management and what that is. And then we're going to talk about how the two relate to each other. Then we'll discuss how we can build a good requirements management process and how that process can help us improve compliance to design controls. Okay, so let's get started. Right, so by the end of this presentation, hopefully you'll have a good general working knowledge of design controls. You're going to understand requirements management and how to evaluate and accept requirements, how to perform bidirectional traceability, how to use requirements attributes to help manage the requirements, and how requirements metrics can help inform and help you make better decisions. We're going to learn how to manage and control requirements changes, and then how to use attributes, especially a requirements criticality attribute, to help us manage and identify essential requirements and requirements that are critical to quality. So let's start with design control background. So design controls have been part of the FDA QSR since 1997. So it's been a long time. The FDA initially implemented design controls to try to help medical device manufacturers identify deficiencies with design input requirements, to identify discrepancies between proposed designs and requirements, and to increase the likelihood that the design transferred to production is going to translate into a device that is appropriate for the intended use and satisfies the user needs. And they did this in relation to having a lot of issues in the field with medical devices. So they thought design controls would improve the quality of the medical devices that were being approved. In the FDA design control guidance, they state that developing a solid foundation of requirements is the single most important design control activity. So that kind of tells you how important FDA thinks design control requirements management is. So design controls is made up of several elements. There is design and development planning, design inputs, design outputs, design review, design verification, design validation, design transfer, design changes, and design history file. Now, most of this, even though requirements really falls under design inputs, and that's what everybody understands by design inputs, Most of these items relate to requirements in one way or another. So design outputs, we have to develop design outputs that will conform to design inputs. For design reviews, we're going to review our design inputs, right, to make sure that they're appropriate and not conflicting or unambiguous. Design verification will confirm that design outputs meet the design input requirements. And design validation will confirm that the user needs and intended uses are met, which is another form of design input, right? And then design changes, obviously managing requirements changes is important. And obviously all our design inputs or all our user needs documents or system requirements or product requirements documents will end up in the design history file. And then obviously our deliverables, the user needs that we create, or system requirements, product requirements, all become part of our design history file. So let's talk about requirements management. So what is requirements? Why do we need requirements management? Why would we want to do this? Well, if your projects are late, right, because you're trying to introduce changes at the end, or if sometimes your developers can't really figure out what the requirements mean, right, and they're making their own interpretation, those are all issues that can be addressed through requirements management. In fact, it is said that approximately for IT projects, which encompass software, obviously, that at least 50% of projects are late, right, or delivered with reduced functionality or over budget. If you have a good requirements management process, this will improve those statistics and make projects more successful. So what is a requirement? So for IEEE, a requirement is a property that a product must have to provide value to a stakeholder. That's the IEEE definition. The FDA definition is a condition or capability needed by a user to solve a problem or achieve an objective. So a couple of key items here is something that is needed by somebody, right? So that tells you that anything that goes into your requirements has to have a purpose. Why is it there? And it's needed to solve a problem. So it has to solve a problem for the user, right? So if it's something that a software developer thinks is a cool feature, but nobody needs it, then it really shouldn't be a requirement. So requirements management process has 4 main goals. It tries to ensure that there is an understanding of requirements by all the stakeholders, right? That they commit to those requirements or approve, right? Or agree that those are the requirements that need to be implemented. That we manage requirements changes, and we'll talk what managing requirements changes means a little later. And that we identify inconsistencies between project work and requirements. And what that means is that you can't have a project plan that says you're going to be done in a year if you have 10,000 requirements to implement, right? So you have to have consistency between the requirements and the other deliverables of the project. So to obtain an understanding of the requirements, first we need to know who are we solving the problem for, right? So we need to determine how we identify the stakeholders. So who are those requirements providers, right? Those are our stakeholders. We need to know how we're going to evaluate the requirements, how we're going to know if the requirements are good and complete. And then we need to know who needs to approve the requirements and when do requirements get approved. So that's how we obtain an understanding of requirements. Then a commitment to requirements is basically that agreement between the different stakeholders that says, if you develop these set of requirements, we're going to have satisfied customers. That agreement is usually made through approval of the requirements. Managing requirements changes is obviously the one constant in life is change. So requirements will also change, but it's very important to manage changes so that they don't, the rest of the product reflects the impact of those changes, right? Nothing comes for free, and requirements changes usually are either going to cost more, we're going to have to add more resources, or we're going to have to add more schedule. but something will have to be done in order to manage the impact of that change.